Hi, welcome to Directions. My name is Jay West, and it's good to have you here today. Directions is a TV show that basically talking and interviewing people who have a change in their life in some capacity. It could be a job change, it could be moving, it could be death or breakup in a family, medical issue, anything that brings directional change to their life and how they handled it and how they walked through it. And so our goal is to bring you help and aid and assistance if you're going through something as well. Today, my special guest is my good friend, Bill Bowes. Bill?
Jay, good to be with you.
Good to be with you too. So Bill and I, you and I have known each other right at 3 years. Is that correct?
That's right.
And we are, what I would say, we are members of a club we never signed up for.
Good way of putting it.
Yeah. And we both lost a spouse. And so we met in something called Grief Share. And Bill has had a number of directional changes, as have I, but we're interviewing Bill today, not me. So
I was going to say, I hit about half the things on your list that you started off with.
that's right. So tell us a little bit about your first wife, Debbie, and how you guys met, and fill in some blanks and, just some basic stuff, and then take us to further along in the journey and what happened. So
Okay. Give you the Reader's Digest condensed version.
Correct.
Young kids nowadays don't get that reference.
Yeah.
But us old people do.
Yeah, or what would those yellow books that you could read that were
Cliff's Notes?
Yeah, Cliff's Notes.
Yeah.
You could read that to learn about Shakespeare or whatever, and you didn't actually watch.
Didn't have to read the book.
Didn't have to read the book. Yeah. So.
So I was teaching at Bellevue Christian Academy at the time, later became Central Christian Schools. And Dana, Debbie's younger sister, was in one of my classes, and we were at a function where I saw a girl who looked like an older version of Dana. And I thought, I wonder if Dana's got an older sister. So I started checking on it, and sure enough, Debbie was 19, I was 23. The funny thing is, I knew her mom. Her mom was a secretary at Bellevue Christian Center, Bellevue Assembly of God.
Yeah, I knew her mom too.
Yeah, that's right.
I never met Debbie, but I knew her mom, and
Yep.
yeah, sure did.
So through her mom, we arranged an introduction, and that's about all it took. We met in May of '82.
So Debbie's sister Dana was also teaching at this school with
She
you?
was a student.
A student.
In fact, I had Dana and their younger sister, Kim,
Okay.
as students. So we met in May of '82, got engaged in July of '82, and married in December of '82.
Wow.
So it was a pretty quick. We were young kids. We were 24 and 20 when we got married. Really had no idea what we were getting into, except that we loved each other, and that's what you do when you fall in love.
Absolutely, that's what you do.
So got married, lived in a rental for the first year. Then we bought a house in South Omaha. Got pregnant 3 months into the marriage, so we moved into the house in August, September of '83, and then Matthew was born at the end of '83. So it was a lot of changes really quick then. But we ended up.
It's interesting. I'm processing mine where I was in '82, and in '82 I was in Houston. In '83 I was in Wisconsin, and then ultimately then we moved in '83 to South Carolina. So I'm all over the country, don't knowing you, but you're.
Oh, you moved a whole lot more than we did. So we stayed in that house. We had 3 kids: Matthew, Mindy, Michael. So they are 40, 37, and 35 now. Hard to believe I've got a 40-year-old. I don't know how that happened.
Well, you're almost 90.
Yeah, it's getting close, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
So we lived in that house in South Omaha for about 11 years. The neighborhood started to change, and we thought it'd be good to move. So we found a place in between Bellevue and Papillion at the time. Now Bellevue has annexed that neighborhood. Really like the area down in Sarpy County. I'd never lived there before. I grew up in the Benson area. Debbie's dad was in the Air Force, so they did a fair amount of moving around, but eventually settled in Bellevue. So Debbie's parents were in Bellevue. And the house down in Sarpy County was pretty convenient. It took a little bit longer to get to my parents' house. But really raised the 3 kids there primarily. Like I said, Sarpy County is a great place. Really enjoyed it. I was teaching, not making a whole lot of money. I think the last year of teaching, I was making $10,500 a year. Debbie was making like $13,500 at Mutual, but once we had Matthew, she stayed home. Another thing that we just both wanted her to stay home with the kids, and we didn't do any financial planning. And it took us about a month and a half without her salary to realize this isn't working too well
This
with
isn't gonna work, yeah.
a new baby and a mortgage and all the other expenses that come along. So I told the school I wouldn't be back the next year. I needed to find a better paying job. But I love teaching. It was a lot of work, but I really loved it. And that summer of '84, the economy took a little bit of a downturn. Not too many people were hiring. Things were
Well,
getting
84 now. I've moved back to Houston. Okay, so I went to Houston, Wisconsin,
South Carolina,
South Carolina, back to
back to
Houston.
Houston.
Yeah,
Oh
okay.
my gosh, you were doing some moving around. So I was painting houses at the time, like a number of teachers do. So there's a little bit of income there. But fall was approaching and the end of painting season, and I was getting a little nervous. And one day my dad said he heard an advertisement for Omaha firefighters, that Omaha was taking applications. I had no idea what the job firefighting was. Didn't really know what it paid, except that it paid better than painting at the time. So I applied for it, went through the testing and got hired, which was pretty amazing. The
So
first
that's a
try
major
like that.
directional change from teaching to
To
firefighting.
firefighting.
Yeah,
Yep.
that's a huge,
Huge change.
and that change, though, over a long period of time, proved to be a really good decision.
Oh yeah, yeah, it really was. Went to Omaha at the time. I think it was a 16-week training academy, and kind of fell in love with the job. Loved the skills that are involved with it. Great people that work with. When we got out of training, I got assigned to the station at 25th and L, which was right near our house, so we could take the fire truck by the house anytime we were out on a call and on the way back. So the kids could come up and see me. It was a lot of fun that first year. But really, I did come to love the job, and I tell young kids now who are thinking about getting out of fire department, it's a great job. You're not going to get rich doing it, but you'll make a comfortable living, and it's a very rewarding career. So I got to go to work for 38 and a half years in the fire department, and it was a real great opportunity.
Not the same fire department.
Not the same fire department. Nope, there was a change along the way there.
Did you ever, now this is a weird thought, did you ever think about being one of these wildcat firefighters that
Oh, sure. Yeah.
does stuff out in the wilderness where there's fires in Montana,
Yeah.
California, and all that?
When you're in your 20s and then maybe early 30s, you think, oh man, that'd be pretty cool to do.
Because I have a second cousin that has done that for years out in California. So.
Yeah, that is
But it's
a
dangerous.
job.
It's
Very
very
dangerous.
Yeah.
Yeah. Very physical, very dangerous. It's a completely different animal than structure firefighting like we do around here. But yeah, you always entertain, oh, what would that be like to do that? But you know, I'm not one to go off on little adventures like that very much, so I never
Well, there's
really
not that
gave
many
it any
wilderness
thought.
fires in Nebraska.
No,
There's
no.
grass fires occasionally along the road or something. But
Yeah, the volunteers out west get involved in some of them. They've got the certifications for that kind of thing that we don't have here on the eastern side of the state.
So at some point you transferred from Omaha to Papillion. Tell us about that directional change.
When I had about 19 years on the job, you would pretty much max out your time on the fire department at 25 years. So I started thinking ahead, what am I going to do when I retire? At that point, at 25 years, I would be 52. And that's too young to not do anything. So I thought, well, what would I want to do? My goal was always to have a hobby that I would love to do, but I could make money doing,
Go
whether
back to teaching.
woodworking or that's work.
Open
But I
your
never
own
developed.
fire academies.
Yeah, oh gosh.
And with that heading, this is a hot place to work.
But I never developed that hobby. My hobbies always cost money, so that didn't pan out. I thought, by this time I was a battalion chief in Omaha, so the rank structure is firefighter, captain, battalion chief, assistant chief, chief. And I thought, I wonder if I could find a chief's job, a fire chief's job, somewhere in the Omaha area, because we really didn't want to move away. By then, at least two of the kids were married, grandkids were starting to come. Don't want to move away from grandkids, so that was out of the question. As I'm looking into what are the requirements for it, I went back and got an associate's degree. I already had a bachelor's degree in education. I thought an associate's degree in fire protection or fire science would be good to have, build on my experience already, and that was great to get. Started an executive fire officer program at the National Fire Academy back in Maryland.
So this is interesting. I've never heard of somebody having a bachelor's degree and then getting an associate's degree.
Yeah, it's kind of weird doing it
Usually the other way
backwards.
around.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that in my entire life. So
Yep.
that's a huge directional, that's a directional thought right there that I've never heard of before. So,
Yeah.
so if you're in that category, maybe you already have a degree and you have to get a little, what would be maybe in your mind a lesser degree than what you already have, but would help propel you to where you want to go.
Exactly.
Okay. Yeah.
Yep. And now they have full 4-year fire degrees, master's degrees, and that kind of thing. But back then they didn't.
Well, I would imagine in the fire department, the degrees are very hot, 120, 150 degrees.
Oh, even higher, yes.
400 degrees. So.
Good one.
Sorry.
So I had really what essentially was a 6-year plan to kind of build up my resume, get additional
That was the
training.
same plan I had in high school, 6-year plan.
6-year
for 4
plan.
years.
But you did it in 4?
That's right.
Oh, that's good.
Actually, I did it in 3.5.
Oh, I
could
did
have
mine.
done it.
I did mine in 5.
Could have done it in 3, but I decided to stay for half a year.
Sometimes it's just fun to stay around college
is.
like that.
Yeah.
So about 2 years into my 6-year plan, the Papillion Fire Chief's job opened up. And I thought, I'm not ready for it yet. Probably both emotionally, educationally, wanted to stay with Omaha through the 25 years. But I thought I'll put my application in. Just the practice of going through a process would be good for me. So I went through the process and I made the first cut and the second cut and then made it to the top 3. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is becoming a little bit more real now. And then they offered me the job. So I had to take a weekend to think about it. I would leave pension money behind in Omaha for leaving early, actually take a pay cut to go from a battalion chief in Omaha to a fire chief in Papillion. So financially, it didn't seem to make a whole lot of sense. Debbie was not thrilled with the idea at first, partly because of the financial part of it and partly because the job is much more public. Debbie was a very private person. I often kidded her that if she was invisible, she would be very happy because she didn't like any attention on her. But she was such a great wife, mom, and grandma, but she just didn't like attention.
Right.
So she knew this job would kind of force her at times to be out in the public a little bit more, which she wasn't thrilled about. So finally we came to a compromise and I said, how about if you go to as few public things as possible? And she said, okay, that's fine. And we talked about the long-term financial, and money's not everything. We had enough money to live on. We were comfortable. So the money wasn't ever an issue with me. So then
Can I ask a question? In your decision process, was your faith involved at all?
At that time, I would say not heavily.
Okay.
Not as much as it should have been. So Debbie grew up, she was a young teenager, maybe 12 maybe, when her parents got saved, and then she followed. But we were at that point in our lives, we were just kind of living life and not as close to God as we should have been, although we weren't far away either. We were kind of in that middle area. Go to church every week and involved in some church activities. But yeah, from a inner spiritual perspective, we weren't where we should be. And I know we both realized that, recognized that. We'd even talk about it, but life got in the way.
Yeah.
So we made that decision, started in Papillion, turned out to be such a great career move, going from a big department to a little department. In Omaha, with a big ship that it is, if they wanted to make a change, it was like making an aircraft carrier turn in the water. It just takes a long time. But with Papillion being really small, we could move really quickly if we wanted to change things.
How many fire stations are in Omaha?
Omaha, there are 25-ish now. I think there were 24 when I finished.
Papillion?
There was one when I started.
Okay.
One of the first things they wanted me to do was plan for a second station, which was a lot of fun to do. So we built a second station. And then, so that was in 2006 that I started in Papillion. 2009 is when the second station opened up. And then in 2014, we kind of merged with La Vista, which had a volunteer department, and we staffed both of their stations. So we went from 1 to 2 to 4 stations in those 8 years.
Is it still that way?
And it's still that way, yeah.
I wasn't aware that Papillion and La Vista were merged. Okay.
Yeah,
New
yeah,
information. Okay.
that was a really big move. That took us probably about 15 months of work to
Did you work
prepare
with Doug
for.
Kindick on any of that?
Oh yeah, yeah,
Doug
Mayor
is the
Kindig,
mayor
Mayor
of La
Black.
Vista, and he's a personal friend on this one. So,
Yeah, both city councils, our rural fire district board, both mayors. It was a big project, but it turned out very, very well. So we had a lot of growth in Papillion. When I got hired, we had 18 career firefighters, about another 15 to 20 volunteers still at the time. And then when I left in 2023, we had 60 career firefighters, 68 employees overall. So it was a lot of growth in those years.
well, it's still growing.
And still growing, yes.
Papillion's one of the fastest growing communities in Nebraska. So
Yeah, between
everything,
Papillion and
every
Gretna.
city service is going to have to expand. So,
Yep, and that's hard to do for city government. It's hard to keep up with.
but you have a good mayor. David Black's a really good mayor too. So
Yes.
he knows how to
Very
move
good.
things along as well. So another
Yeah,
few hours.
I told myself when I took the job, or actually when I started thinking about the fire chief position, that I would work it as long as I could. I know there's a career expectancy for fire chief. Nationally, especially with bigger departments, it's 3 to 5 years that you're expected to last in that job. Some people a little shorter, some people a lot longer. And I thought if I can get 10 years here, that would be enough to make, good changes and then find something else to do, and ended up doing it for 17 because I told myself if I ever had to work for a mayor who didn't like me, didn't want me, we disagreed on things, I would just retire. I'm not going to butt my head against a wall like that. The mayor is the chief decision maker of the city.
Right.
And if I have a serious disagreement, it'll just be better for everybody if I just retire. And I was really fortunate to have David Black as a mayor to work for. Good man.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I've enjoyed my times with him. Haven't been frequent, but yeah, the times I've met with him and were special and significant. So for
Yeah,
sure. So,
good,
yeah.
good.
Yeah. So let's fast forward a little bit to your wife and what she begins to experience at home and
Okay.
things, or whenever that was with a.
So early 2020, before the world changed,
Yeah.
we had, all 3 kids were married. We had 7 grandkids. The youngest were 2 twins, a boy and a girl. The oldest at that time, was probably 16. Yeah, so pretty wide range of age. Debbie spent a lot of time helping with the grandkids. She loved being a grandma. She was a great grandma. A little hard on the budget because she liked buying things for the grandkids too. But life was good. Everything was going well. And then in February, she complained her knee started to hurt a little bit. And she's not one for going to the doctor, has a tremendous pain tolerance, just amazing pain tolerance. So she put up with it for several weeks, and then one day it just kind of locked up to the point where she couldn't put weight on it. So then you got to go see a doctor. So it turns out she tore a little piece of cartilage in her knee, just wear and tear. So she was 57. He prescribed physical therapy, didn't want to do surgery right away, which was a good move. Went to physical therapy. I think she just had her 3rd appointment. Things were going really well. She went from not putting any weight on it to actually taking a few steps, and things were looking positive. We had a tri-level at the time, which means we had steps everywhere. You go in the front door and there's a living room, but then you have to go, or a family room. You have to go up to a living room, to the kitchen, to the bedrooms, down to the basement.
Right.
So she was staying on that
I
main
lived in a
floor.
tri-level in Bellevue, so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So she was staying on that main floor. So I would get her, before I'd go to work in the morning for that week or 10 days, I'd get her breakfast, go to work, either get her lunch in a cooler next to her, or I'd come home for lunch, and then we'd have dinner. Her movement was pretty limited because of the pain in her knee. So on a Thursday morning, everything's normal. COVID is now starting really to become big news at work. We're rewriting policy every day, trying to figure out how do we handle this disease that we're hearing so much about.
This is what year now?
March of 20.
Okay.
So mid-March of 20. From late February into the first 2-3 weeks of March, COVID was everything. That's all we talked about. That's all we did. We made all kinds of plans and preparations at work, redoing our protocols for how we handle patients. There was so much unknown at the time. It was like almost
Yeah,
every
we
day.
we moved our. I don't remember what's the name of that park in Papillion. It has a lake and a little bridge over it, and
Halleck Park.
yeah. So we had a lot. My wife and I at that time, we couldn't go to restaurants. You couldn't do a lot of things, so we didn't feel safe or whatever. So we would drive through, get a coffee somewhere, or something to eat, or even tacos or whatever. We would go to that park,
Yeah.
because it just felt safer out in a big wide
Oh, yeah.
area, from spring into summer. We had a lot of dates at that park. So
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great park.
yeah.
So that Thursday morning, everything's fine. She's still the same. She had PT the night before and learned to walk on one crutch instead of two. So she was practicing that. Knee still hurt, but it was getting better. Got her breakfast, went to work. About 11:20, 11:30 in the morning, she called, which is unusual. And I was on a Zoom call with the fire stations because we didn't meet much in person anymore. We were doing everything by Zoom, and we were talking about what the day's changes were in protocols and what the new knowledge on COVID was. And she said she couldn't breathe. And it was, I don't know if you've ever experienced it. When somebody calls you with bad news, there's something about the tone of their voice that tells you right away.
Right.
I remember the night my mom called me, the night my dad died.
Yeah.
Of a sudden heart attack. She called from the hospital, and whatever she said, the first couple of words, I knew it was bad. And I don't know how you get that sense, but
Right.
that's what that was. So ran out of the office, just left we had 4 fire stations on the Zoom call, left them without saying a word. I didn't even think of saying anything to them. Running out the
I'm
door.
surprised you even took the call.
Yeah,
A little
I was inclined to ignore it, but she didn't call very often, so I figured there must be something going on. Yeah, that's a good point. So on the way out the door, I told my administrative assistant real briefly what was going on. I called 911. So I'm racing home from 108th and Giles, 108th and Chandler, down to 42nd Highway 370, normally maybe a 15-minute drive, and I made it a little bit less than that on that trip.
Made it in 6. So.
That was, at that time, Bellevue had already annexed us, so we were in Bellevue Fire's response area. So Bellevue was responding. I was talking to them on the radio, giving them some background as to what was going on. I think even at that time, I knew what it was. And what she ended up dying from was a pulmonary embolism, a blood clot that got stuck in her lungs. Kind of a classic immobility, problem with the knee. What happened was a blood clot formed behind that knee, and that morning broke loose and traveled up and got stuck in her lung. Can't really prevent that kind of thing if you're immobile because of that type of injury anyway. That's why people have knee surgery. They get them up pretty quickly and get them moving around. So
that was the concern. My story was my wife was in the hospital in bed
for that long, yeah.
Well, she was in the hospital 153 days. She wasn't in when she went to physical therapy the first time. She was out for a while, but then back. But that was the concern. The doctors talked a lot about blood clots.
Yep. Yeah, it's a real concern.
Yep. Yep. So anyway.
And this was just 10 days. Yeah, 10 days after we'd gone to the doctor to find out what the problem was. So it wasn't that long in the grand scheme of things. And so got home, she was still conscious, having trouble breathing. The medics from Bellevue were doing everything appropriate. And I think we knew what the problem was, so we knew we needed to get going. And we got her from that main floor in the house out to the driveway, and that's where her heart quit. And I remember moving her over from the little chair thing we got her out on onto the stretcher, and as we moved her over, that's when she went unconscious. And I'd seen that look on people's faces throughout my whole career, so I knew what that meant. So they started doing CPR. Our generically in the fire service, fire and EMS service, our protocol is that we, when we have a CPR patient like that, we'll do CPR for 15 or 20 minutes. They're medicated. Everything they do in the ER, we can do in the ambulance. So I knew they'd be.
Was there a procedure? Did you know it was a blood clot? Did you
Yeah.
anticipate is there medicine that you can
At that point, no.
inject or something or do something to get it to move?
At that point, no. That was one of the things they tried at the hospital, which I'll talk about too, because they were pretty amazing. So I knew they were going to be there a little bit of time, so I started making phone calls to the kids. Just kind of went in order. Matthew was off work that day. He's a firefighter in Omaha. He was off work, so I called him, gave him I have no idea what I told him, just gave him a brief rundown that she's going to go to Bellevue Medical Center, and I'd meet him there. Mindy, all the kids were home from school because of COVID. So I called her husband. He works down at like 13th and Harrison, and they live at 168th and Harrison. So I knew she couldn't leave the kids and he wouldn't want to bring the kids. So I called him thinking he's at work and he could get home and then send Mindy back down to Bellevue Medical Center. Turned out he was home, so he sent her right away. And then Michael, I couldn't get a hold of, but it turned out Matthew got a hold of him on the way to the hospital.
So you're actually doing a pretty good job in the middle of crisis.
And I think that's just because of my experience in dealing with that as a job.
I don't know that, yeah, and I'm sure that's helpful, okay? But I don't know that the average person would have been able to even, and thankfully, phone numbers are embedded in their phones.
Yeah.
You don't have to memorize and did I get it wrong or whatever, you just click, but you were just like, you were responding really, really well in the midst of a ginormous crisis.
Yeah.
And so it's with that thought that we will come back to our second episode, because this is not intended to be a cliffhanger, okay? But it is. We're simply out of time on this show. And so my good friend Bill Boas will be back, second show, and he'll share the rest of the story. So thank you for tuning in. I hope you'll watch next week as well. Share this video or offer to share it with others, or tell people where it is on KPAO on, you can find it on their website and you can share it with others. Okay. Or on my YouTube if that's where you're watching it. Okay. Thanks so much and God bless you. Bye-bye.